Hi, welcome to this video and welcome back to my simulator. The Heavy team have just released the latest GA version of their mod 1.1.11 for the Microsoft Flight Simulator 787-10. Now I've done this tutorial step-by-step guide on how to get the most out of that. The link to download this and the link to the mod will both be in the description of the video. If you utilize this video and this guide and you want to add anything or have any comments, please feel free to put them down below in the comments section. But for now, let's put a plan together in SimBrief to travel from Canberra to Melbourne in Australia, and we'll go fly that using this guide and see what happens. Okay, well here we are in the launch page. Now I know some people don't like to use the built-in ATC, they prefer to use VATSIM or just fly with no ATC at all, but I actually like to use the ATC. So for me it's important that I synchronize the simulator with SimBrief so they share the same flight plan. So I'm going to show you how I do that to help you. If you don't, you can just skip this bit and just fly whatever flight plan you want with SimBrief. Right, well today's flight is departing from YSCB, that's Canberra, to YMML Melbourne. We're starting out at parking ramp or gate 26 for the large GA aircraft, departing via the Avberg 35 SID on runway 35. Arriving on RB6A16 into an ILS 16Z approach into Melbourne. As this is a relatively short flight, I've set my cruise altitude to FL250. Right, so in SimBrief I'm just going to set up my destination, arrival, the aircraft I'm using, Boeing 787-10 of course, flight numbers, mainly I'm setting the runways, departing on 35, arriving on 16, my cruise altitude of 250, and just the other basic things as you would do with normally any SimBrief. The one thing that I have to do that's different is to set my waypoints. And I do that by taking a note of what the waypoints are here at the top of the flight plan in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So as in Avberg, Vicky, Avberg, you can see there it's going backwards and forwards, and that's because initially it had Vicky and Avberg and then I added the departure and that caused it to add it in a second time. But we'll fix that in the FMC in the aircraft. I'll show you how to do that. That's a good thing to leave in. So basically I put these points into the path in SimBrief, and then when I generate the flight, it will generate a flight that looks the same. The other thing I'm doing in this case is I'll be calculating my fuel load manually. Right, so we're generating the plan there, and then we're going to import it into the local machine, and that should set us up ready to go. Rightio, so we've spawned into gate 26 in Canberra, and here we are. So let's get rid of the yoke there to start off with. I have a hard copy of the procedure ready to go in my hand, so let's make a start. Right, well, step one is to check that the park brake is on. Then we go up to the overhead panel. Everything should be off except for the hydraulics. Keep in mind that some things are still in op on this, like window heating, air conditioning packs, the actual hydraulics, and a few bits and pieces here and there, cargo bay, are all currently in op. Now you will see some things just turn on or activate, and other things you'll see me turn on with the mouse, and that's because I have some controls mapped on my Logitech panels or on my Bravo throttle quadrant or on my Stream Deck. Then we turn the battery on, the external power on. Only front is actually required unless it's snow conditions, but we'll turn all of them on. Then we turn the APU on, the APU generators, and then the engine generators. Right, so we'll go down and have a look at the MFD now. We'll put that onto system and we'll look at the stats, and we can see that our APU is spinning up nicely. Then we'll go back to the overhead panel. Next on the list is fuel pumps. Now in this case the wing fuel pumps will be on, but not the center fuel pumps, because we're not going to load enough fuel to actually have fuel in the center fuel tank. Next we'll turn on the logo lights and navigation lights. We'll turn on the anti-ice, set them all to auto. Window heat we'll check, but that's in op at the moment, and we'll turn the panel lights on if required. We'll hit B on the keyboard for the barometric pressure. We'll turn the screen contrast down, and then we'll turn on the IRS. Make sure the heading reference is to normal. Turn the passenger seat belts on, and just review the air conditioning, that's also in op at this time. We'll then go down to the FMC and we will press the heavy button, and we'll just take a side step here for a second to look at the IRS page, because you have that aligning at the moment. You can set whether it's real time or otherwise, and you can also force it to align. Anyway, back on track, we'll go to the Payload Manager, and what we're going to do here is, as this is only a short flight, we're going to change the fuel load, and I'm going to calculate 2,800 pounds should be plenty for a 1 hour flight max. So we'll execute that, and we can go up and change the display, and there we'll see that there is now only going to be fuel in the wing tanks. Go back up to the ceiling panel. Oh, we should have actually taken note of the CG value there. Next we will be turning on the flight director, making sure that the auto throttle is armed, and we will set the auto brake to RTO. Now we'll go back to the FMC and we'll start the loading into the flight plan. Just a quick check on the IRS alignment, and we'll see that we've got still just slightly over 7 minutes to go. Plenty of time to load our flight plan in. Okay, back to the guide. We're up to point 27 and we hit init ref. It's the top left hand button. You can see some things aren't filled in here yet, but we'll get back to them in a second. Okay, we're going to go ahead and hit index, and then choose ident. We're going to go to POSINET, and we're going to enter our reference airport where we are, which is YSCB. We're at gate 26. We're on a heading of 216. Now I'll select the GPS location and paste that into the missing field. I'll then go to route. Now at this point I could put in the departure and arrival airports and the runway, etc. But the easiest way to get that all loaded is to request the flight plan from SimBrief. So we hit request and then load plan from SimBrief, and it'll go through its various steps. You'll see it's skipping fuel because we've already loaded the fuel. Load all our waypoints, and then we'll be done. Well, we can see back here on the main page that it's loaded our departure airport, our arrival airport, our runway for departure, our flight number, and well, it doesn't load a company route, that's not available at the moment. So we'll activate that and execute it. So the next step is to enter our departure. So we'll select our runway 35 and we'll select our SID for departure, which is the Avberg 2 on runway 35, and then we'll select execute. Now there is a Boeing advisory out saying not to load the approach at this time as it can interfere with TOGA. Now we'll select NavRad, and if you know the VOR, which I know for Melbourne is 114.1, we'll add that in, so we have 14. The ILS, of course, there's nothing there yet because we haven't loaded an arrival. And then we'll go back to initref and we'll add in our 2.0 value for our reserve value. Cost index will be automatically set, and just verify that the cruise altitude is correct. Next we'll go back to the initref index and then we'll go to thrust limits. So first thing we do there is we set the temperature, basically whatever it is outside, or if the temperature is rising quickly you'd want to set it a bit higher, and then you choose the left hand side for your immediate takeoff and right for your climb profile. Now once that's done, it should appear just above the engines on the MFD here. It doesn't currently, it used to. I'm sure that'll be fixed in a future update. Now we go to the takeoff reference page and we enter flaps 5 and just double check the outside air temperature there, and then you can click V1, VR and V2 and you can go to the next page. Thrust reduction and acceleration can be left as default, but you can enter values in there if you like. I like to enter 1,000 feet for thrust reduction and then 1,500 feet for acceleration. And now the FMC pre-flight is complete. We still have a few more things to go over. Now we take the value for V2 that was on the FMC and we put that into the IAS. Then we select LNAV and VNAV. Now you really should set the heading bug to the takeoff runway, but I forgot to do it on this list at this point, but I pick it up later on. VS is correct, and just to verify we have everything set correctly, we'll go look at the PFD, and yes, TOGA LNAV and TOGA VNAV are set correctly, and perfect timing, our IRS is aligned, so we can now go check our flight plan. So the first thing I do is I set my range to 10, and then I put the MFD into plan mode. Then you go to the legs page and you use the step button to step through the plan. Now you'll notice that some of the waypoints don't have altitudes and there are duplicates. This was by nature the way I created the flight plan and was my mistake. As we step through, you'll see we'll go to the first two waypoints, Vicky and Avberg, backwards and forwards there, and then we'll go to the rest of the flight plan. So let's fix the duplicates up. Now we do that by selecting the first waypoint we want. Oh, it went into verify mode there, so we'll go back to the legs page, hit clear, we'll select the one we want, and then we select where we want it to go, and that's pasted it into that location, and then we hit execute, and that will have corrected it. Then we'll step through our flight plan again from the beginning, just making sure nothing doubles back on itself and that all the waypoints are connected, which they are in this case. So this part is completed, we're ready to go. Okay, the next step is to enter any speed restrictions. So if we hit the VNAV page, I'm entering the VNAV restrictions, this particular one for 250 knots at 10,000 feet, and I'm setting the transition altitude to 18,000, which it probably isn't for Canberra, but Microsoft Flight Simulator uses 18,000 everywhere. Now we'll go to the next page. We can check that our cruise altitude and economy speeds are right there. And the third page is very important because when we're ready to descend, a button will appear at the bottom right there, which we'll use to set the aircraft into descent mode. We could enter a hold if we want, but we're not going to at this particular time. I'll do another video on that. Right, well, the next thing we're going to do is put the MFD back into map mode. Then we're going to select menu. We're going to turn on data so we can see the altitudes of the waypoints. Then we're going to turn the left VOR on because we've only programmed that one. It's a pity we don't have VSD yet. Press menu to close that, and now it's time to contact the ATC and get the actual altitude that we're going to enter into the autopilot.
Canberra ground, get a beer and U2 heavy IFR to Melbourne, ready to copy. Get a beer and U2 heavy is cleared to Melbourne, airport as filed. Takeoff runway 35 climb and maintain 10,000 feet. Departure frequency is 133.15, squawk 0545. Get a beer and U2 heavy cleared to Melbourne, airport as filed. Takeoff runway 35 climb and maintain 10,000 feet. Departure on 133.15, squawk 0545. Get a beer and U2 heavy read back correct. Contact ground on 121.7. Good day.
Well, that was handy. They gave us 10,000. We didn't need to change anything. Have to go to the next list, which is prior to start checklist, and we will set the transponder code, set transponder to ident. We'll go back up to the overhead panel. We will turn off ground power. We will turn the fuel pumps on for the wings only. And we're going to turn on the beacon and the strobe and wing lights. Now we would set trim, but it's currently in op. So I'll be using pushback helper to request pushback. Just as a matter of course, this value here for trim should go pink. It does in the real 787, and then you adjust it to that value and then it turns white. But it just turns white, so it's set automatically. Let's use pushback helper to get pushback from the gate, and then we'll start with starting the engines. Now the rule 787, you wouldn't start more than one engine at a time if it's above 40 degrees centigrade, but it isn't in the sim today, so we can start both our engines at the same time. So we would set both engines to start. We would then set fuel control to run for both engines. If it's snowing conditions, engine anti-ice should be on. It's time to do a control check. Turn taxi lights on.
Heavy requesting the end of pushback. Get a bearing 2 heavy request to end pushback received. Canberra ground, get a bearing 2 heavy with Yankee ready to taxi IFR. Get a bearing 2 heavy taxi to and hold short of runway 35 via taxiway Charlie Bravo Papa.
Both engines have now successfully started and are at idle, so we would turn the APU off.
Taxiing hold short runway 35 using taxiway Charlie Bravo Papa. Get a bearing 2 heavy.
And set flaps to 5 degrees. We can now taxi into takeoff position. This is the end of the prior to start checklist. Taxi normally around 7 to 9 knots, 15 knots max. It is around this stage that I realised I hadn't set my heading bug to the takeoff runway, 350, which I'm doing now.
Canberra Tower, get a bearing 2 heavy ready for IFR departure runway 35. Get a bearing 2 heavy altimeter, 29er.9er, 7 wind 267 at 19er. Cleared for takeoff runway 35. Cleared for takeoff runway 35, get a bearing 2 heavy.
Well, prior to takeoff checklist we have clearance, so we'll turn our landing lights on. That's the end of the prior to takeoff checklist. If you have a Logitech autopilot panel, then this is the time to arm your auto throttle. But don't touch anything on the autopilot panel here. That's the correct switches. Don't touch anything else. Okay, now we're going to get the takeoff checklist ready. Right, well, we're in takeoff position. We'll start spooling the engines up to about 40%. Make sure that both engines are spooling up at the same speed. Then we'll press the toga button on the throttles. The engines should ramp up as per the thrust takeoff settings, and at V1 plus 10 we'll rotate, climb at 10 degrees and pull the gear up, and that'll be the end of the takeoff checklist.
Heavy contact Melbourne Centre on 133.15. Good day. 133.15. Forget a bearing U2 heavy. Melbourne Centre, get a bearing U2 heavy is passing 3,500 feet, climbing 10,000 feet.
After takeoff checklist, as the speed markers go by on the PFD speed ribbon, pull the flaps back to 0 degrees and turn the autopilot on. If anti-icing was on for the engines for startup, they can now be turned to auto. Climb as instructed by ATC to cruise altitude.
Hotel Quebec, Melbourne Centre altimeter 29.907, continue as planned. Going to 124.5, generic Bravo Zulu Alpha. Generic Whiskey Foxtrot climb and maintain 8,000 feet. Gear to bearing U2 heavy traffic is 10 o'clock 4 miles at 6,000 feet generic. Report them in sight. Get a bearing U2 heavy, have the traffic. Descend and maintain 8,000 feet, generic Whiskey Foxtrot. Generic Whiskey Foxtrot traffic is 5 o'clock 3 miles at 9,100 feet Boeing D78X. Report them in sight.
Melbourne Centre, generic Victor Hotel, Alpha Quebec Victor, 6,300 feet.
Get a bearing U2 heavy climb and maintain flight level 240. Generic Whiskey Foxtrot has the Boeing D78X in sight. Climb and maintain flight level 240. Get a bearing U2 heavy.
At 10,000 feet, landing lights off, wing lights off, taxi lights off, seatbelt sign off.
Generic Whiskey Foxtrot, traffic alert. 5 o'clock less than 1 mile, 10,800 feet, Boeing B78X. Report them in sight.
In the real 787 you wouldn't put the seatbelts to off, they would actually go to auto, but auto is not mapped on that switch at the moment.
Good day.
At transition altitude, in this case 18,000 feet, press STD to transfer barometric pressure to standard. This completes the after takeoff checklist. Well, sorry to interrupt. I did finish editing this video and tried to upload it to YouTube, but it's just that little bit too long, 1 hour and 7 seconds. And it seems anything larger than an hour, I can't upload. So, what I'm going to do is split it here. We've just got to transition altitude. And when we come back, I'll start off with some things I might have skipped over with SimBrief and Navigraph. The link to part 2 is in the description of this video, and it'll be around the other way because I'll upload both of them at the same time. And when we come back, we'll complete the last few checklists on the tutorial, and hopefully that will complete the training you need to start using this mod. So until then, you all look after each other, take care, and be kind to one another, and we'll see you on part 2 of this video on the heavy mod. Oh, and that's another thing, by the way. In the 3 days it's taken me to shoot this video, they've released an updated version of the mod, and it's now it's actually 0.1.12. So I've checked the compatibility is the same, so it'll all work for now. If I find anything different, I will update the documents. Anyway, we'll see you on the episode 2.